The grocery store on 5th and Callum Avenue was never quiet on a Saturday morning. Carts squeaked against linoleum. Kids tugged at their parents' sleeves. The overhead lights hummed that particular hum that made everything feel slightly too bright, slightly too real. Like the world was daring you to look at it honestly. Raphael Dune had learned, a long time ago, to keep his head down in places like this. He was good at it. 5 years of practice had sharpened him into something precise. Eyes forward. Hood up. Basket on one arm. Felix on the other. Felix, who was currently 4 feet tall and absolutely convinced that every cereal box with a cartoon on it was a personal message from the universe meant just for him. Dad. Felix tugged Raphael's sleeve. Dad. 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 I see it. But Dad. Felix. Raphael crouched to his son's level and pointed at the cereal box Felix was cradling like it was made of gold. The cartoon on the front was a tiger wearing sunglasses. We talked about this. That has 42 grams of sugar per serving. Felix blinked his large, dark eyes. Eyes that were the exact shape and color of someone Raphael spent every waking hour trying very hard not to think about, and said, with complete seriousness, "The tiger needs me." "The tiger," Raphael replied, equally serious, "is a marketing strategy." Felix considered this. His small face scrunched up. Then he put the box back on the shelf with the careful dignity of someone making a great sacrifice, and announced, "I want the one with the honey clusters. That one has 38 grams of sugar." That's less, Raphael agreed, because he was tired, and Felix was right, and some battles were just not worth it at 7:40 in the morning. He stood back up, rubbed the back of his neck, and reached for the honey cluster box on the top shelf, which was the exact moment the cart from the next aisle came around the corner too fast and clipped him directly in the hip. The impact spun him sideways. The basket on his arm swung out. 3 apples launched themselves into the air with what felt like genuine enthusiasm. "Watch it," he started, and then he stopped, because the man pushing the cart had also stopped. And the world, the humming lights, the squeaking carts, the distant sound of a toddler crying in the produce section, went very, very quiet. At least it did inside Raphael's head. Dominic Ashworth had not slept. This was not unusual. He had not slept properly in approximately 5 years, though he had never once admitted this to anyone, including himself on most days. He had simply reclassified sleep as optional and redistributed those hours into work, because work was something he could control, and control was the only thing that had kept him functional after. He cut that thought off the same way he always did. Clean. Fast. No resedu. He was at the grocery store because his housekeeper had the weekend off, and there was nothing in the refrigerator except 3 bottles of water and something in a container that he was fairly sure had been there since before the current administration. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt and dark jeans, which was as close to anonymous as a man his size could get. He was 6'2", broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that people described as intense when they were being polite and terrifying when they were being honest. He ran the Ashworth Group. On paper, it was a real estate and logistics empire with holdings across 14 states. Off paper, Dominic Ashworth was the kind of man people did not bump into on accident and walk away from unchanged. He had turned the corner of aisle 6 at exactly the wrong speed. The cart hit someone. Apples went everywhere. "Watch it," said a voice, and Dominic stopped. He knew that voice. He had spent 5 years being certain he would never hear it again. He had spent 5 years constructing an entire internal architecture around that certainty. Whole floors of himself dedicated to the proposition that Raphael Dune was gone, that Raphael Dune had chosen to leave, that Raphael Dune was a closed chapter in the only book Dominic never let himself reread. He looked up. Raphael was staring at him. Raphael, still sharp-faced and careful-eyed and wearing that particular expression he always got when something shocked him, that split second where his whole face went blank before the walls came up, was standing 3 feet away in a grocery store in broad daylight with a basket full of apples and a child on his hip. A child. A small boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, clinging to Raphael's side and staring at Dominic with enormous, dark eyes. Eyes that were. Dominic's brain processed many things very quickly in high-pressure situations. It was one of the reasons he had survived as long as he had in the world he occupied. He could assess, calculate, and respond in fractions of a second. It took him considerably longer than a fraction of a second to process what he was looking at now. Because those eyes were his. "Felix," Raphael said. and his voice came out steadier than he deserved credit for. "Go pick up the apples, please." Felix, who was 5 years old and therefore absolutely attuned to the specific frequency of grown-up tension, looked between Raphael and the large stranger, decided the apples were a fascinating project, and wiggled out of Raphael's hold to chase them across the linoleum, which left Raphael standing there with nothing between him and Dominic Ashworth except about 3 feet of grocery store air and 5 years of everything. "Raphael." Dominic's voice was lower than Raphael remembered. Or maybe Raphael had just spent 5 years softening the memory of it the way you soften a bruise in your recollection so it hurts less. "Raphael." He said the name twice, like he was checking if it was real. "Dominic." Raphael kept his chin level. "I'm going to ask you to step back. He has my eyes." The sentence landed like a stone dropped from a very great height. Raphael breathed once, slowly. "You don't know that." "Raphael." Something moved across Dominic's face. It was not anger, or at least it was not only anger. It was something rawer than that, something that Dominic's particular face had almost no practice making. "He has my eyes. The exact same. People have similar eyes all the time," Raphael said. "It's a common trait." "It is not a common." "I need you to lower your voice," Raphael said quietly. "There are other people in this store." Dominic looked around as though he had genuinely forgotten where they were. His jaw worked. His hands on the cart handle went white at the knuckle. Raphael had seen Dominic Ashworth negotiate with people who had weapons pointed at him and look calmer than he looked right now. "Dad!" Felix appeared at Raphael's elbow, both arms full of apples, looking immensely proud. "I got 4. One rolled under the shelf, though. I think it lives there now." "That's okay, Bug." Raphael took the apples from Felix without looking away from Dominic. "Good job." "Who's that?" Felix asked, pointing directly at Dominic with the confidence that only exists in people under the age of 10. "Nobody, that's—" "I'm a friend," Dominic said. Came out strange. Like the word didn't fit in his mouth. Like he'd picked it up off a shelf and wasn't sure he'd grabbed the right one. Felix considered him with the thorough, unself-conscious assessment that small children perform on strangers. "You're very big," Felix observed. "Yes," Dominic agreed. "Our neighbor Mr. Patterson is also very big, but he's scared of squirrels." Felix appeared to offer this as a point of comparison. "Are you scared of squirrels?" Dominic blinked. Something shifted in his expression. A tiny crack in the stone. "No." "Cool." Felix nodded with great approval, then turned to Raphael. "Can we get orange juice? The kind with the oranges on the lid. Not the other kind." "Yes," Raphael said. "Go wait at the end of the aisle. I'll be right there." Felix went, already narrating something quietly to himself about squirrels and orange juice and the apparent bravery of large men. The second he was out of earshot, Raphael turned back to Dominic and said very low, "Follow us out of the store and I will call the police. You know I have police on payroll." "I know you do. I also know that a scene in a public grocery store on a Saturday morning is the absolute last thing you want." Raphael tilted his head slightly. "We both know that." Dominic stared at him for a long, tight moment. "How old is he?" Dominic said. It was not a question. The inflection was all wrong for a question. Raphael was quiet. "How old?" "Dominic." "Raphael." His voice dropped even lower. "How old is that child?" Raphael closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. 1 second where he stood in a grocery store in the harsh overhead light and felt 5 years of careful distance collapse like a structure that had never been as solid as he told himself it was. 5, he said. Dominic's expression did something complicated that had no name. "His birthday is in March," Raphael added, and immediately hated himself for adding it. Dominic did the math. Raphael could see him doing it. Could see the calculation moving behind his eyes the way it always did when Dominic was processing something he had not anticipated. "You left," Dominic said. "In April." "Yes." 5 years ago, April." "Yes." The pause that followed was enormous. Took up the whole aisle. "And you didn't tell me," Dominic said. Raphael picked up his basket. "I need to get my son his orange juice." "Raphael." "I need to get my son his orange juice, Dominic." He met Dominic's eyes fully for the first time since the cart hit him, and he absolutely knew, that it was a mistake because Dominic's eyes up close were Felix's eyes, were the same dark and devastating brown, and Raphael had been looking at those eyes in miniature every single day for 5 years and thinking he was safe, and he had never been safe, not even for a moment. And then I'm going to the checkout. And you're going to let me leave this store. I'm not going to let you disappear again. You don't get to decide that. He is my son. You, Raphael said, don't know that. But even as he said it, they both knew. Standing there in the cereal aisle with the fluorescent lights humming and Felix's distant voice asking someone in the next aisle if they knew anything about squirrels, that it was the least convincing thing Raphael Dune had ever said in his life. He made it to the checkout. He made it through the parking lot. He buckled Felix into his car seat with steady hands that he was extraordinarily proud of. And he said, yes, Bug, you can have the honey clusters for breakfast tomorrow. And he drove 2 full blocks before he pulled over and sat for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel and his eyes on the middle distance. Dad, Felix said from the back seat. Yeah, buddy. That man had the same eyes as me. Raphael stared straight ahead through the windshield at a mailbox on the corner that had a small green sticker on it shaped like a frog. Lots of people have brown eyes, he said. Not like mine, Felix said, with the complete matter-of-fact confidence of a child who has spent 5 years looking at himself in mirrors. Mine are different. Uncle Jay always says they're special eyes. Uncle Jay says a lot of things. He does, Felix agreed. He also said that my other dad is probably somewhere missing me. Raphael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Did he say that? Raphael said carefully. Yeah, last Thanksgiving. He said some dads lose their kids by accident and it makes them very sad. Felix paused. Was that man my other dad? Raphael looked in the rearview mirror at his son, at the wide, serious eyes and the small, earnest face that contained, in one concentrated form, the 2 people Raphael loved most in the world, and the one situation he had spent half a decade refusing to solve. We'll talk about it at home, Raphael said. That means yes, Felix said. That means we'll talk about it at home. Dad. Felix. His son looked at him with those impossible eyes and said, with a wisdom that absolutely did not belong in a 5-year-old. It's okay if it's yes. I'm not scared. Raphael looked back at the road. I know you're not, Bug, he said quietly. You got that from him. And then, because Felix was 5 and had the attention span of a very energetic goldfish, his son said, Can we listen to the shark song? And Raphael turned on the shark song, and they drove the rest of the way home with a children's pop song about marine biology playing at full volume, while Raphael's entire carefully constructed life sat in the front seat next to him and quietly rearranged itself into a shape he didn't recognize yet. The real problem, the one Raphael had never said out loud to anyone except Jay, his oldest friend and Felix's emergency contact, was not that he'd left. The real problem was why. And why was a 5-layer answer that started with Dominic's world was becoming genuinely dangerous, and ended with, I overheard a conversation I was never supposed to hear and I made a decision in 24 hours that I have been second-guessing for 1,825 days. The math, as Felix would say, was matang. Jay Okonkwo answered his door on the second knock, took one look at Raphael's face, stepped aside, and said, Felix, your room has new Legos. They're the space kind. Felix let out a sound that was less a word and more a frequency, and disappeared down the hallway. Jay closed the door and looked at Raphael. Grocery store, Raphael said. Okay. Cereal aisle. Okay. He had a cart. Raphael sat down on Jay's couch and put his face in his hands. He hit me with a cart. By accident. And then he saw Felix, Jay said. Raphael looked up. You don't seem surprised. Jay sat in the armchair across from him, folded his long legs, and gave Raphael the look he had been giving him, on and off, for 5 years. The look that said, I am your friend and I love you, and also you have been making a choice I disagree with and I have been waiting patiently for reality to intervene. Jay, I'm not surprised, Jay said simply. Because you live in the same city as him, Raph. You have always lived in the same city as him. I have told you multiple times that eventually, I was careful. You took Felix to the grocery store on 5th. That's on my side of. Dominic Ashworth owns 3 buildings within 6 blocks of that store. Jay raised his eyebrows. I know this because you told me when you moved there. You told me and I said, that's close. And you said, I can handle it. Raphael opened his mouth, closed it, Right? Jay said, not unkindly. Raphael leaned back against the cushions and stared at the ceiling. The ceiling had a water stain in one corner that had been there since Jay moved in 4 years ago and was shaped vaguely like a running horse. Raphael had spent a lot of hours staring at it during various crises. He did the math, Raphael said, out loud, in the cereal aisle. Of course he did. He said he's not going to let me disappear again. Jay was quiet for a moment. Then, is that a threat or a declaration? With Dominic, there's sometimes not much difference.
Rafael.
Jay leaned forward, elbows on knees. Can I say the thing I've been not saying for 5 years? Can I stop you? You ran, Jay said. I know why you ran. I was there. I heard what you heard. And I understood, I genuinely did, why you made that call. But Felix is 5. And he has already figured out, on his own, that something is missing. He paused. He asked me about his other dad at Thanksgiving. He told me you said something. I said something because he asked me something, and he was looking at me with those eyes, and I am not capable of lying directly to those eyes. Jay spread his hands. That child has Dominic's exact gaze. Like scientifically. It's uncanny. I know, Raphael said. I've known since the second he was born. So what are you going to do? Raphael looked back at the ceiling horse. I don't know yet. Yes, you do. Jay, you drove straight here instead of going home. You know what you're going to have to do. You've probably known for a while. Jay's voice was gentle but precise. The question is whether you're going to do it on your terms or whether Dominic Ashworth is going to find your address and knock on your actual house. Raphael thought about that. He thought about Dominic's face in the cereal aisle, the cracked stone of it, the rawness underneath that Dominic would never have let show 5 years ago. He thought about Felix saying, I'm not scared. I got that from him. He thought about 1,825 days of mornings where Felix woke up and asked questions Raphael had learned to answer sideways. He's going to find my address regardless, Raphael said. He's Dominic Ashworth. Probably within 48 hours, Jay agreed. So I should control the terms, Jay said. Yes. Raphael closed his eyes, opened them, looked at his friend. I heard him tell Prentice that the Callaway deal meant a child would be collateral. I know. That's why I left. That's the thing I couldn't. I know, Raph. I was pregnant. I was 8 weeks pregnant and I heard him say that a child would be collateral and I could not. He stopped, pressed his mouth together, started again. I could not be in that world with a child. I could not put Felix in that world. I know. Jay's voice was very quiet. And I also know that Dominic did not take that deal. Raphael went very still. The Callaway deal fell through, Jay said carefully. I looked into it about 2 years ago. It never happened. The whole thing collapsed before it finalized. Prentice left the organization 6 months after you did. And from everything I can find, which is admittedly limited because Dominic is careful, his operations have shifted significantly. Less of the old business. More legitimate. He paused. I'm not saying he's a saint. I'm not saying it's safe. I'm saying the specific thing you were running from may not be the thing that's waiting for you now. Raphael sat with that for a long time. In the back of the apartment, he could hear Felix narrating something elaborate about a Lego spaceship and its crew of astronauts who were also, apparently, raccoons. He's been different, Raphael said finally. Dominic, just from seeing him today. He looked human, Jay offered. Tired, Raphael said. He looked tired in a way he never let himself look before. 5 years will do that. He thought I left him, Raphael said. He doesn't know I heard the conversation. He just thinks I walked away. Jay nodded slowly. So he spent 5 years thinking you chose to go. Yes. And you spent 5 years thinking he was the kind of man who would put a child in danger. Yes. Jay looked at him steadily. Those are 2 very large misunderstandings sitting on top of each other. Yes, Raphael said for the 3rd time, and the word came out differently each time. The first a fact, the second a confession, the third something closer to the beginning of a decision. The text came that evening. Raphael's phone lit up with a number he had deleted 5 years ago and still knew by heart. I know this is you. I had your number traced. I'm not angry. I need to talk. I'll come to you or you can choose the place. But we are going to talk, Raphael. He deserves that much. Raphael stared at the message for a long time. Felix was in the bath, singing something that had started as the shark song and evolved into an original composition about a shark who solved crimes. Raphael typed back, Monday. The park on Heron Street. 10 a.m. Come alone. The response was immediate. I'll be there. And then, after a pause, another message appeared. Is he healthy? Raphael looked at that for a moment. The 3 words and the period at the end instead of a question mark, because Dominic never asked questions he wasn't sure he could survive the answers to. He typed, he's perfect. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then good. Just that. 1 word. Raphael put the phone down and went to get Felix out of the bath before the water went cold, and he spent the rest of the evening reading about a raccoon astronaut who discovered a planet made entirely of apples, and he did not let himself think about Monday. He only mostly succeeded. Monday morning arrived the way important days always do, with the audacity of ordinary weather. It was a clear morning, early June, with the kind of sky that looked freshly washed. The park on Heron Street had a small pond in the middle and benches around it and a path that looped through a cluster of oak trees, and at this hour it was populated mostly by people walking dogs and one elderly man who came every morning to feed the ducks in what appeared to be a very serious and regimented operation. Raphael arrived first. He sat on the bench nearest the oak trees, the one he'd chosen because it had sight lines in every direction and a clear exit path. 5 years of living adjacent to Dominic Ashworth's world had given him instincts he'd never entirely shaken, and he waited. Dominic arrived exactly on time. He was alone as requested. He was wearing dark pants and a plain navy sweatshirt, and he walked with that particular quality he'd always had of making every path seem like it was a path that had been built specifically for him to walk on. He saw Raphael immediately. He stopped for only a fraction of a second before continuing toward the bench. He sat down at the far end. They were quiet for a moment. The duck man threw bread at the pond. You look well, Dominic said. You look tired, Raphael replied. I've been told that recently. Pause. You told Felix I'm nobody. I said nobody, and then corrected it to a friend. You heard the correction. I heard the first word. Raphael looked at his hands in his lap. I panicked. You've been panicking for 5 years, apparently. Dominic. I'm not doing this to be cruel. Dominic's voice stayed level with visible effort. I need you to understand that I am sitting here and I am choosing to be here and to speak to you like a person because I want you to actually talk to me. If I come in angry, you shut down. You always shut down when I come in angry. He paused. I remember that. Raphael looked at him sideways. You remember that. I remember everything, Dominic said flatly. I remember everything about you with a precision that I find deeply inconvenient. Something in Raphael's chest did something it was absolutely not supposed to do. His name is Felix, Raphael said. Dominic breathed out slowly through his nose. Felix. He's 5. His birthday is March 14th. He's obsessed with marine biology and raccoons and Lego and cereal with too much sugar in it. He has your eyes and my jaw and his own personality, which is somewhere between a philosophy professor and a golden retriever.
Rafael Post.
He's the best person I've ever met. Dominic's jaw worked. He was staring at the pond. Why didn't you tell me? And here it was, the question underneath all the other questions. I overheard something, Raphael said carefully. A conversation between you and Prentice. About the Callaway deal. Dominic went very still. You said a child would be collateral, Raphael said. Those were the words. A child will be collateral if necessary, and that's the cost of the deal. I was 8 weeks pregnant and I heard that and He stopped. Rebuilt. I made a decision in 24 hours. I packed what I could carry. I left. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences. It was heavier. You thought, Dominic started, and something in his voice cracked on the first word. You thought that was about. I didn't know what it was about. I knew what it sounded like. The Callaway deal was about. Dominic pressed his mouth together. It was about a custody dispute. Callaway was trying to use his child as leverage in a legal dispute, and Prentice suggested we let it play out. I said if a child was being used as a bargaining chip, the deal was over. I said, a child as collateral is a cost I won't pay. He looked at Raphael directly. That was the conversation. I killed the deal. Prentice left 2 months later because I'd been systematically restructuring away from the things he wanted to keep doing. The Callaway deal was the last straw for him. Raphael stared at him. He had been carrying this for 5 years. This specific weight. This specific interpretation. I heard the middle, Raphael said slowly. You heard the middle, Dominic agreed. Without the end. Without the end. Raphael turned back to the pond. The duck man was now apparently in a disagreement with one specific duck about the distribution of bread, and he was taking it very seriously. I didn't know, Raphael said. I know you didn't know. Dominic's voice was even. Very carefully even. And I spent 5 years thinking you simply chose to leave. That I had done something, that I had become something, and you looked at it and walked away. And I spent 5 years deciding I had no right to be angry at that, because I knew what I was, and I knew what I'd built, and I knew that choosing to love someone who lived in it wasn't something anyone owed me. Raphael turned his head. Dominic was still looking at the pond. That's why you look tired, Raphael said. That is one of the reasons, yes. Dominic's jaw flexed. There are several. They sat in the June morning with the oak leaves moving overhead and the duck man eventually surrendering one additional piece of bread to the particularly aggressive duck. And neither of them said anything for a long time. I want to meet him, Dominic said. I know. Not like that, not demanding. He stopped. Started differently. I'm asking you if I can meet my son. Raphael looked at him. He already knows something. He figured it out in the car on the way home Saturday. He said he wasn't scared. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. He said that. He said he wasn't scared and that he got it from you. Raphael watched the complicated procession of things moving across Dominic's face. He's right, by the way. He's remarkably fearless for 5. He picks up bugs with his bare hands. He once attempted to negotiate with a parking enforcement officer about whether our spot counted as a fire lane. Did it? Technically, yes. He still almost won. Something moved in Dominic's face it took Raphael a moment to identify it, because he hadn't seen it in 5 years, and in 5 years it had gotten rusty from disuse. A smile. Not a full one. The beginning of one. He's mine, Dominic said. It wasn't accusatory. It was almost wondering. He is, Raphael said. And you raised him alone. Jay helped. But yes, mostly alone. A long pause. You did a remarkable job, Dominic said. From what I saw in 30 seconds of conversation about squirrels, he's remarkable. Raphael felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was that tight. He is. Could we try? Dominic stopped again. This was unusual. Dominic was not a man who stopped and restarted sentences. Dominic was a man who chose his words once, correctly, and deployed them. The halting was new. Can we try to figure out what this looks like? Without it being a battlefield. Because I don't want another stop. Felix deserves better than a battlefield. He does, Raphael agreed. And Dominic looked at his hands. His very large, very scarred hands that had built an empire and were currently sitting folded in his lap with the careful stillness of someone trying very hard not to reach for something. I'm not the same as I was 5 years ago. I'm not going to hand you a list of my changes and ask you to grade them. But I'm not the same. Raphael looked at him for a long time. I can see that, he said finally. Dominic looked up. I can see it, Raphael said again. I could see it Saturday. In the cereal aisle. He paused. I'm not saying I trust it yet. I'm saying I can see it. That's more than I had on Saturday morning, Dominic said. It is, Raphael agreed. The duck man finished his rounds and folded up his bread bag with the satisfied air of someone who had done excellent work, and walked away down the path, and the pond settled back into its own quiet with the ducks paddling circles in the morning light. Wednesday, Raphael said. There's a place by the river. It has an outdoor area, picnic tables, very public. Felix likes it because they have a fish pond you can look at. He paused. He can meet you there. Dominic exhaled. It was a short, controlled exhale that, on anyone else, would have been a shudder of relief. Wednesday, he said. Come as yourself, Raphael said. Felix is 5. He'll know if you're performing. I don't know how to perform with children. That's probably fine. Dominic stood. He straightened his sweatshirt. A gesture Raphael recognized, an old habit, the way Dominic had always adjusted himself at the end of conversations that had cost him something. Then he looked down at Raphael on the bench. "For what it's worth," Dominic said. "I never stopped." He cut himself off, reorganized. "I looked for you, for the first 8 months. And then I stopped because I decided that if you'd chosen to go, tracking you down would only be for me and not for you." "That was right," Raphael said quietly. "It didn't feel right." "No. It rarely does." Dominic held his gaze for a moment longer. Then he nodded once and turned and walked back down the path between the oak trees with the morning sun at an angle through the leaves, and Raphael watched him go and then turned back to the pond and sat there for a while longer, with his hands in his lap, not thinking about anything in particular, or thinking about everything in particular, while the ducks went about their patient, indifferent lives. That evening, Raphael put Felix to bed and then stood in the hallway outside Felix's room for a long time, listening to the particular silence of a sleeping 5-year-old that always sounded, to him, like the most valuable thing in the world. Wednesday, he thought. Asterisk. It will either be fine or it will be something else, and then we will figure out what to do about something else. This was, he acknowledged, not the most sophisticated plan. But it was the plan he had. Wednesday arrived and Felix woke up knowing. This was the thing about Felix. He had an internal weather system for important days. He sat up in bed at 7 in the morning and announced, without preamble, "Today's the day I meet him, right?" Raphael, who had been standing in the kitchen failing to pour coffee into a cup because his hands were behaving with slightly less precision than usual, said, "What? The man from the store." Felix padded into the kitchen in his raccoon pajamas. "You said we'd talk about it at home, and then we talked about it at home, and you said we'd meet him, and I've been waiting." He climbed onto the kitchen stool. "Is it today?" "Yes," Raphael said. "Okay." Felix reached for the honey clusters. "Does he like fish ponds?" "I don't know. Everybody likes fish ponds," Felix said with great confidence. "Even people who don't know they like fish ponds. They just haven't met the right fish yet." Raphael poured his coffee. "Felix," he said carefully, I need you to know that today might be a little complicated." Felix suggested. "Yes. Uncle Jay says you make things complicated because you think too fast and feel too slow." Raphael stared at his son. "Jay says that." "He said it to Mr. Patterson. I was listening from the stairs." Felix did not appear remotely apologetic about this. "He also said that you love very big but you get scared of the size of it." He crunched a spoonful of cereal. "I get scared of the dark sometimes, but I still go to the bathroom because I need to go." "You go even if you're scared." "Thank you for that analogy." "You're welcome." Felix pointed his spoon at Raphael. "You should go even if you're scared, Dad." Raphael sat down across from his son and looked at him. This 5-year-old philosopher in raccoon pajamas who had somehow produced the exact piece of wisdom Raphael needed at 7 in the morning without seemingly trying, and thought, not for the first time, that Felix was going to either save the world or thoroughly confuse it. Possibly both. The place by the river was called Harlow's, and it had been there for 30 years, and it had the most sensible menu of anywhere Raphael had been to in this city, and it had, crucially, a fish pond along its back fence full of koi that came in sizes ranging from impressive to "what are you feeding these things?" Felix ran directly for the fish pond the moment they arrived. Raphael stayed at the entrance, one hand in his jacket pocket, watching the gate. Dominic arrived 3 minutes early. He was wearing, and Raphael noticed this because it was notable, jeans and a plain dark green jacket, and he was carrying nothing, and he had left behind whatever quality he usually walked around with that made rooms rearrange themselves when he entered them. Or at least, he had turned it down. He looked like a man trying very hard to take up only exactly the amount of space he needed. "He's at the fish pond," Raphael said by way of greeting. Dominic looked past him, found Felix immediately, the small figure in the blue jacket, pressed against the fence with his nose approximately 2 inches from a very large orange koi. Something in Dominic's expression went quiet in a way that was completely different from his usual stillness. "Okay," Raphael said. "Come on." They walked across the outdoor space together, and Raphael did not examine the specific quality of walking next to Dominic again, which was different from walking next to anyone else, which it always had been, which was something he was absolutely not thinking about. Felix heard them coming and turned around. He looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at Felix. "Hi," Felix said. "Hi," Dominic said. Felix looked at him with those eyes. His own eyes, in a 5-year-old's face, examining him with 5-year-old thoroughness, and said, "You're my other dad." Dominic made a sound that was not quite a word. "It's okay," Felix added helpfully. "I already figured it out. We have the same eyes. Look." He pointed at his own face and then at Dominic's face. "Same. It's like a matching game." Dominic crouched down. A somewhat remarkable sight. A man his size folding himself to a child's level, and looked at Felix directly. "I'm Dominic," he said.
"I'm Felix."
Felix stuck out his hand. Very seriously. "It's nice to meet you, Dominic." Dominic looked at the small, offered hand for a moment, and then he took it and shook it, which made Felix look extraordinarily pleased. "You're very big," Felix observed. "Even lower down. I've always been big. I'm going to be big too." Felix tilted his head. "Dad says I'm going to be taller than him when I grow up." "Your dad is." Dominic glanced at Raphael. "Your dad is not short." "He's 5'11", Felix said, in the tone of someone reciting a fact they have memorized. "I looked it up on the measuring thing in the bathroom. He marked my heights on the doorframe. I'm 4'2". "That's impressive for 5. "I know." Felix nodded, satisfied, and then turned back to the fish pond. "This one is Gerald. I named him. He's been following me up and down the fence for the whole time. Do you want to see?" And that was somehow that Felix named fish. Dominic knelt at the fence of a fish pond at a family restaurant on a Wednesday morning in June, and a 5-year-old showed him each koi with the earnest thoroughness of a natural history guide, and Dominic looked at every single one and asked questions with genuine focus, and Raphael sat at a nearby picnic table and watched and thought about his very sophisticated plan, which apparently was working. They ordered food eventually. Felix got a grilled cheese, which he dissected with scientific precision before eating. Dominic ordered black coffee and a sandwich that he ate with the mechanical efficiency of someone who eats because it's required and not because he particularly prioritizes it. Raphael got the soup, which was good, and didn't taste it because he was too busy monitoring everything. "Do you have a house?" Felix asked Dominic. "Yes." "Is it big?" "Fairly." "Do you have a fish pond?" "I don't." Felix looked genuinely concerned. "You should get one. Gerald would like a visit." He ate a corner of his grilled cheese. "Do you like raccoons?" "I've never thought about it. Dad thought he didn't like spiders until I showed him a jumping spider. Now he thinks they're okay." Felix looked at Dominic very seriously. "I think you'd like raccoons." "I'll consider it. They're very smart. They can open locks. They once..." Felix launched into a detailed story about a raccoon documentary he'd watched approximately 40 times, and Dominic listened to the whole thing with an expression on his face that Raphael couldn't quite read from the side, but which was, it was open. It was a kind of open that Dominic's face was not architecturally designed for, and it was doing it anyway. After the raccoon story, Felix looked between the two of them with his soup-level calm and said, "Are you and my dad going to be friends again?" Both adults were quiet. "We're working on it," Raphael said. "Good," Felix said. "Uncle Jay says it's important to work on things. He says the best things are always the ones that take work." He looked at Dominic. "Uncle Jay is very wise. He's my emergency contact." "Is he?" Dominic said. "Yes, and he makes very good food. Not as good as Dad's food, but very good." Felix paused. "Can you cook?" "No," Dominic said. "That's okay," Felix said generously. "You can learn. Dad taught himself. He made a lot of bad food at first, but now it's great. He says mistakes are just information." Something about the way Dominic looked at Raphael when Felix said that. Some quick, unguarded look that lasted less than a second before Dominic aimed it back at the table, pressed against Raphael's ribs in an inconvenient way. "Right," Raphael said. "Mistakes are just information. We should get the check." "Can I say bye to Gerald first?" Felix asked. "Yes, Bug." Felix slid off his seat and made for the fish pond with great purposefulness, and Raphael reached for the check, and Dominic reached for it at the same time, and their hands came very close to touching, and they both pulled back simultaneously. "I've got it," Raphael said. "I'd like to. I've got it." Dominic pressed his lips together and sat back. A pause. Dominic started. "I know," Raphael said. "No, I was going to say..." Dominic looked across the outdoor space at Felix, who was having what appeared to be a heartfelt farewell with Gerald the Coy. I was going to say he's everything. He's everything I didn't know I was missing. A pause. That sounded. No, Raphael said. It didn't. Dominic looked at him. I'm not going to pretend this is simple. I know what this is. I know there's 5 years of things between us that aren't sorted. I know I can't show up and expect. You're not showing up and expecting, Raphael said. You're here because I invited you here. You invited me here for Felix. I invited you here, Raphael said carefully. For Felix, and also because what you said at the park, about not wanting it to be a battlefield. He met Dominic's eyes briefly and then looked back at the check. I don't want it to be a battlefield either. What do you want it to be? Dominic asked. And that, Raphael thought, was a very good question that he was absolutely not answering in a fish pond restaurant on a Wednesday, so he said, let's take it 1 week at a time, and left it there. What Raphael had not anticipated was Dominic at week 2. Dominic at week 2 showed up at the park Felix liked, with permission, with advance notice, with a text that said simply, is Saturday at 2 p.m. still good? And he brought nothing except himself. No gifts. No elaborate gestures. Just himself in jeans and a plain jacket, sitting on a bench with his long arms on his knees, waiting. Felix ran to him like they'd known each other for years. Raphael, standing 10 feet back, thought, this is going to rearrange everything. He was correct. The call came on a Friday afternoon at the start of week 3. Raphael was at his desk. He designed architectural models for a firm downtown, which was one of those jobs that sounded creative from the outside and was mostly computer work and precise measurements from the inside, which suited him perfectly, when his phone lit up with Dominic's name. He stared at it for 3 full rings before answering. There's a problem, Dominic said. No greeting. Raphael sat up straighter. What kind? Not the kind you're thinking. It's not a danger situation. Dominic's voice was controlled in a way that meant he was actively controlling it. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before it reaches you from somewhere else, because it might, and I'd rather you hear it from me. Tell me. Chester Prentice is back in the city. Raphael's entire body went very still. I thought he left the organization. He did. He's been building something on his own for 4 years. And he's apparently decided that I'm an obstacle. That I know too much about his current operations for him to be comfortable. He's not just in the city, Jay said, showing up at Raphael's apartment on a Thursday evening with takeout and a very specific expression. He's been in the city for 3 weeks. He came back around the time you and Dominic had your park meeting. Raphael looked up from the architectural model he'd been working on. That's not a coincidence. Almost certainly not. Jay set the takeout on the table and sat across from Raphael. Someone told him Dominic had made contact with someone significant. Doesn't seem like they know about Felix yet. They're looking at you as, he paused, as a personal connection to Dominic. Which you are. So I'm the leverage point. Potentially. But here's the part that's actually interesting. Jay leaned forward. Prentice is not operating the way he used to. He's stretched thin. The thing he's been building on his own is it's not going well. He needs Dominic destabilized to buy himself room. He's not after you specifically. He just needs Dominic distracted. Jay paused. The second Dominic's legal team moves on him, he's not going to have the resources to play the long game. How long until they move? Dominic's filing by Monday. Raphael sat back. You're in contact with Dominic. I have been for about a week, Jay said, entirely unruffled. He texted me, introduced himself, was very direct about the situation and very respectful about the fact that you're what matters in this and not his agenda. He paused. I like him, actually. He's ridiculous. But I like him. Jay. I know. I'm supposed to be on your side. You are on my side. I'm on Felix's side, Jay said pleasantly. Which, at this point, involves both of you. So, he opened the takeout containers. How are you doing with all of it? Raphael looked at the architectural model on his desk. It was a scale model of a proposed community center, and he had been detailing the exterior measurements for 2 hours, and he had barely noticed the time passing because approximately 70% of his processing power had been allocated elsewhere for 3 weeks. I don't know, he said honestly. Yes, you do, Jay said. Jay, you know exactly how you're doing. You're just deciding whether to say it out loud. Raphael was quiet. He's good with Felix, he said finally. I know. Felix told me. He also told me that Dominic knows what a koi fish is and that he's really tall, like taller than the tallest thing. Jay smiled. Direct quote. He's... Raphael pushed the model aside slightly, as if making room for the conversation. He's patient with Felix in a way I didn't expect. He doesn't try to rush it. He doesn't bring things. He shows up empty-handed and just follows Felix's lead. Last Saturday Felix spent 45 minutes explaining the taxonomy of raccoons and Dominic just listened. Actually listened. Asked follow-up questions about raccoon dexterity that Felix later reported to me as the best conversation he's ever had. Jay rested his chin in his hand. And how is it for you watching that? He asked. Raphael looked at the takeout container in front of him. It makes things complicated. Complicated good or complicated bad? Complicated both, Raphael said. It's good for Felix. That's unambiguous. Felix is happier. He's been asking fewer sideways questions about fathers and missing things. He's just content in a way that has a name now. And that's, he stopped. Good. That's unambiguously good. And the other part, Jay said. The other part, Raphael said carefully, is that the Dominic I left 5 years ago was a man who was very difficult to know and very difficult to trust. And the Dominic who is showing up to parks with his sleeves rolled up and listening to my son explain raccoon taxonomy is, he's either the same man who's learned something or he's a different man entirely. And I can't tell which. And I need to be able to tell before. Before, Jay said. Raphael picked up his chopsticks. Before anything, he said. Before anything that isn't co-parenting. Jay nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more but was wisely restraining himself. What? Raphael said. Nothing. Jay. I was just thinking, Jay said, that for someone who's worried about not being able to tell if he's the same man or a different one, you seem to have a very detailed picture of exactly who this version of Dominic is. Raphael ate his noodles. Jay smiled and ate his noodles. They watched a nature documentary about deep-sea fish for the rest of the evening, and Felix came out of his room twice. Once for water and once to report that he'd had an idea for a raccoon whose job was to be an architect. And wouldn't that be very cool? And Raphael said yes, that would be very cool, and Felix went back to bed apparently satisfied. The Prentice situation resolved on a Tuesday, and it resolved in the most anti-climate way possible for a former organized crime lieutenant. He was arrested by federal agents at a breakfast restaurant at 8:15 in the morning while eating eggs and reading a newspaper, and the charges were extensive enough that his lawyer looked visibly unwell at the courthouse. Dominic texted Raphael 2 words. It's done. Raphael texted back. I heard. You okay? A pause. Then, ask me that in person. They met at a small place near the river. Different from Harlow's, just the 2 of them, no fish pond, no Felix this time. Felix was with Jay at Jay's apartment, doing something that involved 4 types of glue and a great deal of ambition. The place was low-lit and quiet and had the kind of menu that took itself very seriously, which was too much for a conversation like this one but was the first available reservation Dominic's assistant had found, and Dominic had warned Raphael in advance, and Raphael had said that was fine. They sat across from each other, and the bread basket arrived, and Dominic looked like a man who had just put down something very heavy and was not entirely sure what to do with his hands without the weight of it. It's over, Dominic said. The Prentice situation. That one, yes. He looked at the bread. There are others. There are always others. But this one is over, and it's the one that was the one that touched you. And Felix. He looked up. I want you to know that I'm going to be done with all of it. The whole architecture. I've been dismantling it for 3 years, the legal filings, the restructuring, the people I've let go, the things I've walked away from. It's not finished, but it has a definite end. 18 months, maybe 2 years, and the Ashworth Group will be completely legitimate. Not mostly legitimate. Completely. Raphael looked at him steadily. You didn't have to tell me that. I did, Dominic said. I did because I need you to know what you're looking at. When you watch me with Felix and you're trying to figure out if I'm the same man or a different one, I need you to have the full picture, so you can make an actual decision and not guess. Raphael was quiet. What decision? He said. Dominic looked at him across the table with those dark eyes that were exactly Felix's eyes, and said, whatever decision you need to make, about what this looks like. All of it. Co-parenting or something more than that, or whatever the shape of it is going to be, you should make it with full information. Not with a partial conversation you overheard 5 years ago. That's very reasonable, Raphael said. I'm trying to be reasonable, Dominic said. It's somewhat effortful. Raphael's mouth curved slightly. He flattened it immediately. Don't do that, Dominic said. Don't do what? Flatten it when you almost... He stopped. Never mind. You were going to say, smile. I was going to say it, and then you were going to argue about it, and I don't have the energy tonight. Dominic reached for the bread. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you stay in the city? He looked at Raphael directly. 5 years ago, when you left, you had enough money to go anywhere. You have family in other states. Jay was in Chicago for a while, you could have gone there. Why did you stay here? Raphael considered his answer. He considered it through the arrival of the appetizers and through Dominic refilling their water glasses himself, because the server was occupied and Dominic had always been somebody who refilled glasses without thinking about it. A small domestic habit that had always struck Raphael as oddly at odds with the rest of him. Because this is Felix's city, he said finally. He was born here. I didn't want to take him somewhere that wasn't his. That's the practical reason, Dominic said. It's a real reason. It is. And the other reason. Raphael looked at his plate. The other reason, he said carefully, is that I didn't know how to go somewhere you couldn't theoretically be. The silence that followed was very complete. I'm sorry, Raphael said. That was... Don't apologize for that, Dominic said. His voice had changed, become lower and more careful, the way it always did when he was handling something he didn't want to drop. Please don't. It's not a simple thing, Raphael said. I'm not saying. I know what you're saying, Dominic said. I know exactly what you're saying. And I am telling you it is the same. It has been the same. And I'm not asking you to do anything with that right now except know it. Raphael looked at him. Dominic looked back. Okay, Raphael said. Okay, Dominic said. And they ate dinner. It was good. Despite everything, despite the weight of it, despite the 5 years and the misheard conversation and the grocery store and the cereal aisle and all the accumulated distance. It was a good dinner. They talked about things that weren't crises. Dominic told a story about a building acquisition that had gone wrong in a way that was, in retrospect, deeply absurd. Raphael told him about the community center model and the client who kept changing the window measurements. Dominic asked questions about the architecture work that were specific and intelligent, and Raphael answered them, and somewhere in the middle of the appetizers and the main course they stopped being careful with each other in the way that people are careful when they're afraid of what they might say, and became careful in a different way, the way you are careful with something you don't want to break because it matters. At the end of the evening, standing outside in the warm June air, Dominic said, "Can I take Felix to see the aquarium next weekend? They have a new shark exhibit. Jay mentioned he's interested in marine biology. Jay talks to you now. Jay talks to everyone. It's his best and most alarming quality." "Yes," Raphael said. "He can go. You can both go." Pause. "I'll come too." Dominic looked at him. "For Felix," Raphael said. "Of course," Dominic said. "For Felix." But neither of them was looking at the fish when he said it. The aquarium was a complete disaster. Not in the bad way. In the overwhelming, chaotic, entirely too much stimulation way that only occurs when you bring a 5-year-old who is extremely passionate about marine biology to a place that has dedicated its entire existence to marine biology. Felix made it approximately 40 feet inside the main entrance before he stopped walking entirely. The reason he stopped was a tank the size of a wall, floor to ceiling, filled with a slow revolution of fish that ranged from the modest to the extraordinary, lit in blue-green light that made everyone standing in front of it look like they were underwater themselves. Felix pressed both hands flat against the glass. He didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Raphael and Dominic stopped on either side of him and waited. "Dad," Felix said finally, in a very hushed voice. "Yeah, Dad. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I know, Bug. It's better than the koi pond. Much better." Felix turned to look up at Dominic. "Did you know about this?" "I'd been here once before," Dominic said. "Years ago, but it looks different with you looking at it." Felix studied him for a moment with his extraordinary 5-year-old assessment, then turned back to the tank. "I want to be one of the people who takes care of them," he said. When I grow up, a marine biologist? Raphael said. Or an aquarium architect, Felix said. Someone who builds them, so they're better, so the fish have more room. He traced a slow arc on the glass with one finger, following a large flat ray that was gliding past in that unhurried way rays had, as though time was something they had long ago agreed not to worry about. Someone should build them more room. Raphael looked over Felix's head at Dominic. Dominic was watching Felix with that expression that had become more familiar over the past few weeks. The open one, the one his face wasn't built for and was doing anyway, the one that looked like something being carefully tended. He could do that, Dominic said quietly. Easily. He could do anything, Raphael said. Came out warmer than he intended. Dominic looked at him. We should probably agree on this now, Dominic said just as quietly. Before he decides and we're obligated to support it. Is there a career path too dangerous? Because I'm starting to think he might eventually want to swim with sharks. He's been talking about it since he was 3, Raphael said. I've been mentally preparing. Right? Dominic paused. We'll get him swimming lessons. It was such a small thing to say. Such an ordinary, practical, parental thing. We'll get him swimming lessons. Containing within it, without making a big announcement, without asking for permission, a quiet assumption of the future. A small, matter-of-fact claim on the continuing shape of things. Raphael decided not to examine it too closely in the middle of the aquarium. They spent 4 hours there. Felix saw the sharks and reported each one to Dominic with the thoroughness of a field researcher presenting findings. He found the touch tank, where small rays and horseshoe crabs could be gently touched, and he touched every single one with the careful reverence of someone meeting royalty. He got a shark plush from the gift shop that Dominic paid for before Raphael could object, and when Raphael started to object anyway, Felix said Dad he wanted to, with the supreme confidence of a child who has correctly identified adult dynamics and is using them. On the way out, Felix walked between them and held both their hands. He did it completely naturally. Reached up on each side, grabbed a hand and continued discussing whether sharks dreamed, as though this were an entirely ordinary arrangement, as though this were simply how things were. Raphael, who had not held Dominic's hand in 5 years and was now experiencing the strange proximity of doing so indirectly, separated by one small child, the hands connected through Felix, kept his expression entirely neutral. He looked over Felix's head. Dominic was also keeping his expression entirely neutral. Felix was explaining the REM sleep cycles of fish. Week 5, then week 6, then 7. Dominic took Felix to the park. Raphael came. Dominic came to the apartment for the first time. Stood in the hallway and looked at the frame drawings on the wall, Felix's art from school, Raphael's architectural prints, and did not say anything for a moment and then said, "You built something good here," and meant the apartment and also did not mean the apartment. Felix showed Dominic his Lego raccoon astronaut colony. Dominic sat on the floor and helped add a new wing, with an attention to structural integrity that impressed even Felix. Jay came for dinner one Friday and spent most of it watching Raphael and Dominic argue pleasantly about the best route to the river and being visibly and insufferably smug about everything. Things rearranged themselves. Not all at once. Not in a rush. In the careful, accumulating way that things rearrange when they're being rebuilt right. It was a Sunday in late July when it actually happened, and it happened the way real things usually do, quietly without announcement in the middle of something ordinary. Felix had fallen asleep on the couch after dinner. He'd been running all day, the park in the morning, swimming in the afternoon. They had, in fact, gotten him swimming lessons, a playdate with the neighbor's kid after that, and he'd crashed mid-sentence at around 8 in the evening, completely upright, still holding his raccoon plush, with the thoroughness of someone who had genuinely used every available unit of energy. Raphael carried him to bed. He came back out to find Dominic in the kitchen washing the dishes. "You don't have to do that," Raphael said. "I know," Dominic said. He kept washing. Raphael leaned against the counter and watched him for a moment. "Stay," he said. Dominic's hands slowed. "Not," Raphael said immediately, because his brain and his mouth were apparently not coordinating well. "I mean, I know what you mean," Dominic said. "Do you?" Dominic dried his hands. He turned around and leaned against the sink and looked at Raphael, and they were 4 feet apart in Raphael's kitchen on a Sunday night in July with a sleeping 5-year-old down the hall, and the city was doing its city thing outside the window, and the overhead light was the ordinary yellow of a regular apartment bulb, and none of it was dramatic or cinematic or grand. It was just them. 5 years older. 5 years changed. In a kitchen with clean dishes and a raccoon-related crayon drawing on the refrigerator. I'm not asking you to, Raphael started. Raphael, Dominic said. I'm trying to say something and you keep.
Rafael.
Dominic said his name the way he'd said it in the grocery store twice to check if it was real. I've been in love with you since the second year I knew you, and I have been in love with you through 5 years of you being gone, and I am not going to rush you into anything, and I am not going to pretend to be something I'm not. And I am not the same man I was, and I know it's going to take time. I know that. I know that. He paused. But I need you to know, before we go any further with the co-parenting and the parks and the dinners and the aquarium, that the reason I show up is not only Felix. Raphael was quiet. Felix is the most important reason, Dominic continued. He always will be. But he's not the only one. I know, Raphael said. You know. I've known for about 3 weeks, Raphael said. Possibly longer. Dominic looked at him. I have also, Raphael said carefully, been in love with you since the second year, approximately. He paused. Slightly longer if I'm being accurate, which I usually try to be. The longest pause of the evening. You could have mentioned that, Dominic said. I'm mentioning it now. 3 weeks ago would have been. I was still working up to it. It's been 5 years. And now it's been 5 years plus 3 weeks, Raphael said. And I'm mentioning it now. Can we work with that? Dominic looked at him for a moment longer, that steady, evaluating, intensely focused look that had always felt to Raphael like being understood in a very specific and slightly alarming way. And then he crossed the 4 feet of kitchen and stopped directly in front of Raphael and said, Yes, we can work with that. Good, Raphael said. Good, Dominic agreed. They stood very close in the kitchen light, and Dominic put one hand on the counter beside Raphael's hip without touching him. A question that was also an answer, and Raphael looked up at him and said, I'm glad you ran into me with that cart. I didn't run into you. The cart. You ran into me. Technically the cart. Dominic. I'm glad I ran into you, Dominic said. And that was it. That was the moment. Not the grocery store, not the park, not the aquarium. Here in a regular kitchen, with dishes drying on the rack and a child's drawing on the refrigerator and the ordinary weight of everything that had been and everything that was beginning. The two of them deciding, quietly, to be on the same side of things. 3 months later, Felix decided that Dominic should be taught about raccoons using a PowerPoint presentation. He made it himself with Jay's help, and it had 14 slides and extremely ambitious graphics and one slide that said, in Felix's careful 5-year-old lettering, why raccoons are cool and why you should like them. Dominic sat through all 14 slides with complete seriousness, asked 4 questions, and at the end said, very comprehensive.
I'm convinced.
Felix beamed so hard his whole face changed shape. Later, when Felix was in bed, Dominic showed Raphael the photo he'd taken of slide 7, which was titled Raccoon Feelings, and contained a drawing of a raccoon looking thoughtful. He made a slide about raccoon feelings, Dominic said. He's very emotionally intelligent for 5, Raphael said. He got it from you, Dominic said. Raphael, who had heard this in reverse from his son, said nothing and let it stand. A year after the grocery store, in the early spring, Felix turned 6. They had a party at Jay's apartment, raccoon theme obviously, and there were streamers and a cake shaped like a fish for reasons that were very clear to Felix and required lengthy explanation to everyone else. At the end of the party, Felix sat between Dominic and Raphael on the couch and showed them both a drawing he'd made. It was a house. A big one with 3 stick figures outside it. The tallest one was labeled Dad Dom. The medium one was labeled Dad Raph. The small one was labeled Me plus Raccoon. The raccoon appeared to be living in the stick figure's pocket. Is this our house? Dominic asked. It's going to be, Felix said with total certainty. I'm already planning it. He went back to his cake. Dominic looked at Raphael. Raphael looked at Dominic. He's an architect, Dominic said. He absolutely is, Raphael agreed. 2 years after the grocery store, a clear morning in early June, sharp with the first real heat of summer, Raphael was standing in the kitchen of a house that now had 3 people in it, making breakfast while Felix set the table with the particular seriousness he brought to all tasks he considered important, and Dominic was reading something on his phone with his feet up on the chair across from him, wearing the hoodie he'd left here 6 months ago and never reclaimed because neither of them suggested it, and the raccoon plush from the aquarium was sitting on top of the refrigerator because Felix had decided it needed a high vantage point, and the drawing, the house with 3 stick figures, was framed. Slightly crooked, because Felix had insisted on hanging it himself. It was an ordinary morning. It was the best morning. "Dad," Felix said, carefully placing a fork. "I've been thinking about the new raccoon exhibit they're building at the zoo." "I know you have," Raphael said. "I have suggestions for the architects." "I know you do. I think they should have more climbing structures and also a section where you can watch them problem solve. Like a puzzle room but for raccoons." "That's actually a good idea," Dominic said from the table without looking up. Felix looked very vindicated.
Dad Dom agrees.
"Dad Dom has good taste," Raphael said. Dominic looked up at that. Raphael met his eyes across the kitchen. Something passed between them. The compact, wordless language that accumulates between people who have chosen each other twice, who have crossed distance and misunderstanding and 5 years of separate mornings to arrive at this one ordinary June morning together. Something that had no name but didn't need one. "Breakfast is ready," Raphael said. "Finally," Felix said. "I've been hungry for a really long time." "It's been 4 minutes," Dominic said. "That's a long time when you're hungry," Felix said, and sat down, and reached for his honey clusters, and the morning continued. There are people who find each other twice. Once when the world is simple, and again when they've both become someone worth finding. If the story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Like this video, subscribe so you never miss another story, and leave a comment below. We read every single one, and we want to know, which moment in this story hit you hardest?